Welcome to the 10th episode of the second series of the Women in CX podcast, a series dedicated to real talk conversations between women in customer experience. Listen in as we share our career stories, relive the moments that shaped us, and voice our opinions as loudly as we like about all manner of CX subjects. I'll be your host, Clare Muscutt, and in today's episode, we'll be talking CX tech and life lessons, including my guest's experience of being a young gay woman in the 90s, succeeding in a male-dominated industry, and surviving cancer to become the UK's #1 CX professional. Let me introduce you to today's inspiring woman. She began her career as a grad in operations before moving to Premier Inn, where she headed up brand excellence and later became customer service director. These days, she's senior director of professional services at Medallion, and in her spare time speaks and raises funds in aid of Maggie Centres, who provide free practical and emotional support for people living with cancer. Please welcome to the show CX sister Amanda Riches. Hi Amanda.
Hi Claire.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, good actually. Very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. And welcome to everybody listening at home as well. So just for the listeners' benefit, I think I should probably point out that you and I have known each other rather a long time, haven't we?
We have indeed, yeah.
So Amanda and I worked together back in the Whitbread days. And for those of you that have been following the podcast, I quite often make references to the times that I ran pubs or my first job in the office. Mandy was my head of department.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's great, yeah.
I just called you Mandy again. Amanda.
It doesn't matter, it's fine.
So should we just jump right in then and talk about kind of that backstory of how you got into CX and the pub days? Because obviously we both worked in the same kind of industry at a similar age, being young women in pub companies. I just wondered, what was that experience like for you, and especially being a gay woman in a male-dominated environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I forget, we both started in the pub operations, and so prior to Whitbread, this was for me. I mean, I joined an area manager graduate training scheme at a pub and leisure company when I left university. And actually, when you think about CX, it's not a bad grounding, and also for life in general, and how to survive in that challenging environment. And I was very much, I guess, I was 23 and I was managing sort of pub managers who were 40 to 50-year-old, as you say, a very male-dominated industry, gay when it wasn't always okay to be gay. And I think, probably in some of their eyes, it was I was a graduate trainee, so some kind of young upstart just out of uni. But I mean, pub operations was a great place to be. It was a bit of a boys' club, so jobs for the boys. But it was fantastic that in our intake, they were actively recruiting to take women into that industry, particularly because they were trying to make pubs more female friendly. So you need some people in leadership positions who could, drive that forward. But it was a tough environment, and you probably experienced it as well, Claire. It was quite laddish behaviour, and some behaviour that was quite borderline, I think, towards women, but obviously only from a few people.
Yeah. Well, you were obviously an area manager, whereas I was a general manager. So you were like managing pub managers, right? Whereas I was like in the thick of it, being a pub manager alongside a load of other pub managers. And 90% of my colleagues were all white, middle-aged men. And I was also 23, running my first hotel and restaurant. And it was a similar experience, I guess, of kind of no matter what I did, I still had to work that bit harder just to prove that I could do it. Or in like team management meetings, having the confidence to speak up when everybody around me had like literally 10, 20 years of experience in the job. And I'd just come out of university. I'd worked in pubs, all my life in terms of, the 5 years before, and worked my way up to assistant and general manager, but it felt very intimidating as a young woman.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. And, I guess, and probably the sort of being young piece was more of a challenge actually than the being gay part. I think maybe a gay man might have experienced more challenges than my partner and I did. But when we came out of work, we were actually met with more curiosity and you know, the kind of "we're hey girls" type of thing from the lads. But
Sexualization of
exactly.
Oh.
But interestingly, I mean, the main negativity that I remember was from the HR leadership.
Oh.
And I think these days, people in people and culture functions and HR, they're leading the way in that diversity and inclusion. But at that point, we were seen a bit of a problem, only by a small minority in the HR leadership, but still a problem. And there was actually kind of sentiments of how would female colleagues feel working with us, being in the same room as us, you know, those sorts of things. And that sort of stereotype that if you're gay, you're a predator or whatever. So I'm really glad that things have moved over time and we don't really experience that so much anymore.
Yeah, and I didn't realise that you'd been with your partner from like right at the very start of your
Long time
career.
now.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Old and married.
Proper old married couple now. That's cute.
Exactly.
So how did you get from the operations into customer experience, and what were the biggest challenges you faced along the way?
Well, I think multi-site operations is a great grounding in all areas of business, and at running pubs as well. You would have seen that and known that. And I naturally moved from that into more sort of business development type of roles, and then customer experience roles, both in corporates like Whitbread, but also through my own consulting company on interim contracts like at Fidelity and a variety of different sectors. So, and I think I just always loved understanding what customers really wanted, how we could do things better. And then as I got more of the sort of higher up corporate positions, it was more about, you know, you see the front line sometimes struggling, they're trying to do their best. And actually we've got business processes and things like that that are in place, and huge amount of administrative tasks that kind of get in the way, really. Maybe you experienced that being on the other end of it, but I certainly think it was natural for me to start thinking about how can we cut the crap really of what was out there and stop people delivering, you know, what they needed to do for their customers.
I remember those days very much as, you know, kind of trying to operationalize the brand. So very much thinking about kind of like standards and quality and measures and metrics that drove the right behaviors. And I think again that gave me a really good grounding in CX.
It does, and you don't realize it necessarily at the time, but you know, so I do think it, but you know, I suppose over the years, it must be, I mean, it's probably 20 odd years now, Claire, which I know you've called me old once today, and now you're probably going to do again, but
2006, 2007, so 14 years, 13 years ago.
Yes, it's still a long time for you now as well. And but yeah, I mean, I really, you know, I think I sometimes think about, and you know, why do I continue doing what I do? And of course, you know, I think business results and the ROI of customer experience is of course key, absolutely. But it is more than that. And I know, you know, I mean, the return on investment piece is so critical. I think it used to be seen as a bit of a fluffy thing, customer experience, but now you have to be focusing on what the business outcomes are. You have to be focusing on what are the barriers to purchase, all those sorts of things. But I think I may have said to you before, Claire, that for me, it's God, this is going to sound really corny now, but
Go and say it.
Better experiences are, for me, ultimately make people and customers and employees happier. And when I think about why else I do this, it is about making people's lives better. And I think despite our focus on CX in recent years, there's way too many experiences that still suck the life out of people. And you talked about one of my biggest challenges, Claire, and I think, you know that I've been through health concerns and had cancer, what I say 3.5 times, but it's essentially 3 big times and 1 small. And life is short and time is precious. And I really find it incredible that we're still asking those same questions day in, day out, you know, about why are some simple tasks so hard to do? why are we still waiting on hold on a call to a call center because the website doesn't do what you want it to do, all those sorts of things. And I definitely think that, as CX professionals and leaders, we have a responsibility to make lives better and get rid of those kind of energy sapping experiences.
That's so interesting. So you've kind of like tied together your experience of how short life is to how many days we waste or time we waste for customers in their experience waiting on things like phone lines. I just have to ask that, how do you get cancer 3.5 times?
Yeah, so it's one of those weird ones where I suppose I've had 3 major ones over the years, and actually that's over 25 years now. So it's a long time that I've had those, and I'm very lucky. I know I'm very lucky, and there will be people potentially listening who, unfortunately, their loved ones are not here now. But the half was because it was kind of a small skin cancer. So I feel like it was so small and compared to the others that it's actually, I count it as my kind of half.
Just brush that one off.
Brush that one off.
Oh, that was
exactly.
easier to deal with. And
Yeah.
how was it like trying to maintain, I guess, your career and your health simultaneously?
Oh, it's always a struggle, and I think for anyone in this industry, and generally in work, keeping that balance is hard. But I always found that almost keeping life, not making cancer your whole life, but making it part of your life was better for me. And I think it's very individual. But for me, it was about still keeping some element of normality. So still trying to work through parts, probably too much so at times. But continuing to keep that work going gave me a sense of life hasn't just stopped, because everything else, when you're with cancer, you lose that control. So yeah, I tended to keep moving along, but looking after yourself and being good at your job is hard sometimes.
Yeah, it is generally, but in the face of, I suppose, such serious illness, were you ever worried that you might not make it, or did you always have a positive kind of outlook from the doctors? Was it?
It really does shake your mortality, and your view on mortality, and I think COVID has done that to an extent to a number of people now as well. But I guess it was interesting the first couple of times. I don't know whether it's the optimism of youth, but I didn't get that same sense, and I always thought I would come through it. But then it really hit me hard on the third one, really did, and that's where I was sort of, I don't know whether I can do this again. But you can't necessarily call it sort of positive thinking or anything. I don't think that's the right thing, but it's just, I'm really lucky to have lots of loving family and friends, and as I say, a good view on trying to still be productive in the world. So it just kept me going, really.
Yeah. I think to some extent they do call it a fight, don't they? So having to it's not thinking positive, because that doesn't make sense, but like you said, like having the attitude of I want to beat this. I know I experienced it in my family. Like my grandma and grandfather both had cancer multiple times, but yeah, that kind of sense of I can and I will beat this was something very powerful that I felt around them, that they had that kind of belief that it would be okay. I just hope.
But even the fighting angle is a difficult one, because I know some people who have, that almost makes it then feel like, from a cancer patient's perspective, that did I not try hard enough?
Right.
So it can, that has a double-edged sword. I think it is about trying to really focus on what you can do. But I've known some really, really strong people who did everything they possibly could, and are still not with us today. And so it's but and I don't want to be flippant, because as I say, I acknowledge people have had different experiences. For me, I've also had some real positives about it, and my experience, I certainly think that my partner Fiona and myself, we have always really just appreciated each other probably more because you don't know that it's always going to be there.
And
Yeah.
I can kind of understand that from the perspective of COVID, just with that, how much everybody has lost that we all took for granted, right? No, not like living per se, but travel, being able to go on holidays, being able to meet up with people, being able to hug people. That appreciation when we can go back to doing it, I'm sure a lot of us will treat life with much more gratefulness for the fact that we can do the simple things.
I think that's right. And and also although we've got a world of technology, I think the human interactions during this period, thinking about from a customer experience perspective, has been really, really important. And we saw, with the clients that I work with now, we've seen employees sort of in stores and that their customers being so concerned that actually your employer is treating you as well, so, and it's coming through in the feedback and things like that you see, that human connection has become even more important.
And I suppose that's a good place to jump back off from in terms of thinking about the future. So yes, technology is increasing, the human factor, everybody agrees we want to maintain this, but it seems to be getting further and further apart. What is it exactly that you're doing at Medallion that helps companies with CX and helps with the human side?
Yeah, so so for those that I know, a lot of people do know Medallion, but many people may not. So so we're the market leader in experience management, and that's both on the sides of really helping to understand and manage the experience of customers or employees, but also citizens. So we work with some government bodies as well. And that's through two things, as you say. Firstly is technology, and the second bit is about advising our clients. So that's more the side that I sit on. So from a technology perspective, it's really around capturing feedback and other data from the experience itself, or if you're unable to complete a task on a website, that kind of thing, or maybe operational data that really helps businesses understand what's happening holistically about that experience, and then really using the technology for machine learning to detect patterns of behavior, predict risks and opportunities. But actually, as you say, that human element is at the end of the day, whilst clients who work with Medallion are embarking on a technology implementation, actually it's more of an effort in change management. And it's about central, as you know, Claire, to driving CX is really about changing the behavior of people within that organization. So me and my team will work with our clients to really say, how can let's help you to drive that change in behavior, whether that's so much, Claire, and I'm sure our listeners will as well, but it's engaging the people, it's that visible executive leadership, the training and the communication. Have you got the structures in place to design a great experience, all those sort of things that come around it, which is so important.
I agree. So where do you think CX is heading then, given all that? What should we be watching out for?
It's a tough one, isn't it, really? But as I say, I still think that the human element is still a critical part, even though technology facilitates that. But I think I guess a big challenge is that customer journeys and customer experience, which used to be more straightforward, are really quite complex now. And particularly with COVID, you've got customers interacting in different ways. You've got employees trying to navigate new ways of working. And therefore, I think there's so many areas, if I go back to the experiences that time waste and suck the life out of people, there's actually a lot of areas now that we might not meet expectations. So I think for me, there's two key things. And one is around getting that complete picture. And the second one is acting with speed and adapting as quickly as possible. And I think, when I say getting that complete picture, essentially, Claire, what I'm talking about there is that there's many brands and organizations who are still reliant on direct feedback in the form of surveys. And that's absolutely a foundation, but I do think it's really also about how do you get the rest of that information that's out there, whether that's social media or harnessing employee feedback to get their insights into what their customers are saying, or analyzing chat logs or visit patterns on website, returns behavior, do you know what I mean? All those sorts of things, the call handling time, that gives you such a much more holistic picture of what's actually going on. And I worry that where people only rely on one form, they're not really seeing all of that that's there and useful to really help improve customer experience. And then but I guess the kind of capturing it is one part, and I know you're big on this as well. It's what you do with this, and what you
that's far more important.
Is so much more important. And I feel like, and I don't know whether it's because we're so in this COVID piece at the moment, but I really think that we've got to set ourselves up better to adapt and act quickly. And I, some large companies, particularly larger ones, sort of lose that startup way of adapting and generating new ideas, and we almost spend time and money sort of researching so much and then bet on these huge strategies that go right across the entire company, and instead of sort of helping them learn and adapt faster, it just sort of slows people down because you've got to get so many people involved and that sort of thing. So I was thinking about this when you sort of posed the question to me the other day, and I think two things probably is how do we keep our organizations nimble, and maybe that's around certainly fostering the culture of ideation. And I don't know whether I see many people do that, those deliberate processes to get new ideas from your front line, from your rest of your people.
Agreed.
And then rather than betting on these huge big strategies, it's like I kind of like to call them micro innovation. So it's not just you're breaking a little continuous improvement of a process. It's not these major big breakthroughs like Uber and disrupting an industry. But how do you get those kind of micro innovations and really test and learn and adapt and those sorts of things? That but I don't know, you've also talked about this sort of ability to adapt previously as well.
Yeah, well, I say I come from a customer experience design angle in how I approach CX. So, which is basically how do you inform a set of ideas that you can trial and test rapidly in order to get feedback before placing your bets on something that's potentially going to be a massive investment. And I also wrote a paper calling out that when it comes to customer experience, transformation is the problem, not the solution. Again, agreeing with you that when things become so big and unwieldy and are still kind of managed in a command and control format, and everything's done by data and metrics and not by kind of like actually asking your frontline teams where are the customer problems, or focusing on solutions rather than the problems to address, we end up with the kinds of programs that take such a long time and so much resource and such strong leadership that by the time they actually land the thing that they were trying to land, it might be 4 or 5 years, and actually the goalposts have changed, or customers want something else, and it's a massive waste of energy. So I think like Agile CX for me definitely is a way forward.
Really critical, absolutely.
Yeah, but I think the practices already exist in some departments, like IT, for example. You wouldn't probably wouldn't build like a digital product without going through design, discovery, development, delivery, kind of iterative approach. But when companies get bigger, it seems to be that the departments find it harder to work together and to work in that kind of way. So you might have like waterfall style projects happening in operations and HR, and agile projects happening in D&T and technology, but what you end up with is an even more disjointed experience in my experience.
Absolutely.
Which is challenging. But just conscious of your time, and my final question really is just to kind of summarize all of that. What would your 3 biggest takeaways be for women in CX?
Ooh.
Put you on the
So
spot.
yeah. I know, I was thinking, what have I taken away over the years? I think trusting your judgment, definitely, and your intuition. So I know they always laugh about women's intuition, but I remember, I suppose, in early days of my career, being told by a senior executive that he wished I'd just trust my judgment more and not have every single fact and figure analysed to the nth degree. And clearly, I'm a big believer in data-driven decisions. I wouldn't be doing what I do otherwise. But I guess we probably shouldn't overanalyze things, and sometimes you just have to take action and test it and learn it and change it. And women in particular, I think, need to trust their gut, because I don't know whether we always do. We kind of want to make sure that it's sort of all there first, and I don't know whether that's your experience, but maybe I'm talking from my point of view.
No, it is. And I think like trusting your instinct comes from a place of reassurance, that you can reassure yourself that you'll be right. So I know I had a lot of experiences in my early days of my career, and even like, high school and uni and stuff, where I really doubted myself. So sometimes I look for reassurance when I don't really need it, but just to make myself feel better. But I don't know how you kind of build that, other than just saying, in the 5 seconds between thinking about something and deciding what you're going to do about it, just doing it and trying, or just saying it, or just taking that action and not overthinking too much. But I think it's a very female thing to do, it appears.
It is. I think so, definitely. And maybe, I mean, part of what you're doing here is about that, is around building that resilience that we have. So actually not being concerned about it, building that support community around you of good women, but also men. One of my people, I'd say one of the guys that I work with, Matt Churchill, he's been my partner in crime alongside, and makes me better at what I am, and maybe helps me to almost just jump in a bit more. And I think you need those people around you. So I really love what you're trying to do here, Claire, definitely. And building that community of people. So I don't know whether I've given you 3. I think the one other one that I would say is just being bold. And I think it's linking to that piece there, that I can't remember what that TED talk is, and you'll probably know it, that talks about how women need to be 100% perfect almost, and we're almost kind of socialized to be perfect, and therefore we're overly cautious sometimes. And I do think,
and then that has to be 0% emotional, isn't it, that one?
I'm trying to remember. I knew it wouldn't come to me, but it's that bit where I remember her talking about where, if a man is going to look at a job on LinkedIn, if they've got 60% of the qualifications, they'll go for it, that one. Whereas 100%, we kind of go, oh, we've got to have it all. And I think we have to be bold. And if you think about it in CX, we are catalysts for change. So generally we're and not everybody likes change. So you've got to be bold, you've got to be resilient, and I think you've got to trust your judgment and just go for it. And I don't see that there are any failures as long as you learn for them.
Yeah. And that's definitely a theme that I'm sensing throughout these podcast episodes, is everybody reflecting on like the fear of failure, but actually the failures or the difficult times or the challenges actually being the biggest place of growth. When we're sailing along and everything's fine, it's nice, but we don't really get that much out of it other than enjoyment. But the times where we've struggled, or we've been flat broke, or lost our jobs or whatever, that's when our character really does get built. So not being quite so afraid of failure, and if it feels uncomfortable and you're not sure, trust your judgment, but recognize that if you're feeling unsure and you're in uncharted waters, it's probably a good thing, because it means you're growing.
It is, yeah, you're right. And learning from those setbacks, as you just say, and having that. I love at Medallion, we embrace growth mindset, and I think that's such an important thing. Definitely, you can learn and grow, and
it's all about growth mindset.
Move forward. So
Yeah. And it's interesting, I think, hearing you talk as well, like when you encounter companies with fixed mindsets. So, whether or not you were a growth mindset individual or there are teams that have got very much a growth mindset as an organization as a whole, if they're not willing to try and change and try things differently, or are not up for changing in response to consumer needs because they want to maintain something like the brand that they used to have. It's a one-way trip, isn't it, really, to Darwin's theory of evolution. You're not going to make it if you're not open and willing to adapt, but you need to have that growth mindset in order to do it. Well, it's been really cool catching up with you today. So nice to see you
too.
And thanks to everyone that listened at home, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks, Amanda. Bye.
Thanks, Claire. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Women in CX podcast with me, Clare Muscutt. If you enjoyed the show, please drop us a like, subscribe, and leave a review on whichever platform you're listening or watching on. And if you want to know more, please do join us at Women in CX community and follow the Women in CX page on LinkedIn. Join us again next week, where I'll be talking about how to use CX insight and metrics to drive action with a woman who overcame the challenges of working in male-dominated environments to become the CX commercial director at Kantar. See you all next week.